Before we float into tonight's journey, if you're finding peace in this content, consider using your hype points on this video. It helps the channel in ways that truly matter more than you might realize. If you're listening on Spotify, leaving a review makes a genuine difference in helping others discover these stories. And if you'd like, drop a comment letting us know what time it is where you are and where in the world you're listening from. We absolutely love seeing where everyone tunes in. No pressure, only if you want to. And of course, if you enjoy what we do here, subscribing means we can keep bringing you more content like this. All right, let's begin. There's a light that crosses the night sky. If you've ever looked up at the right moment just after sunset or before dawn, you might have seen it. Not a plane, not a star, something else. Moving steadily, silently, tracing an arc from horizon to horizon in just a few minutes. No sound reaches you, no engine roar, no mechanical just light, constant and bright, gliding through the darkness overhead. That light is home to people. Right now, as you listen to this, human beings are living inside that light, sleeping, working, eating, floating, looking down at the same earth you're standing on. They're traveling faster than any bullet ever fired, circling the entire planet in less time than it takes to watch a movie, and they're doing it together. People from different countries, different languages, different histories, sharing the same metal walls, the same recycled air, the same endless view. This is the International Space Station, and tonight we're going to explore it. Not with urgency or drama, but with the quiet curiosity it deserves. We'll move through its story gently. 100 facts told as a single, continuous journey. No rush, no chaos. Just the calm wonder of humanity's strangest, most peaceful achievement. A place where gravity loosens its grip, where borders dissolve, and where, for more than 2 decades, people have lived together above the world. Let's drift upward. Chapter 1. What the ISS is. The International Space Station is a laboratory, not a hotel, not a tourist destination, not a military outpost. It is a place built for science, for asking questions that can only be answered away from Earth, for watching how things behave when weight disappears. Every module, every instrument, every system serves this singular purpose: to understand what happens when we remove gravity from the equation of existence. It orbits Earth continuously. It never lands, never stops. It has been moving without pause through the same path around our planet for more than 2 decades. A permanent loop, high above the weather, the noise, the ground. The station follows an invisible track through space, returning to the same positions again and again, a clockwork rhythm that never falters. That orbit exists in what we call low Earth orbit, not deep space, not far from home. The station floats just a few hundred kilometers above the surface, close enough that astronauts can still see cities at night, close enough that Earth fills their windows with color and cloud. The planet remains enormous in their view, a curved horizon that never quite becomes straight. A reminder that they haven't truly left, only stepped back for a better perspective. The station moves faster than a speeding bullet, about 28,000 kilometers per hour, fast enough to circle the entire planet in roughly 90 minutes, faster than anything most of us will ever experience. And yet, inside, everything feels still. There's no sensation of movement, no wind resistance, no turbulence. Just the gentle hum of ventilation systems and the occasional creak of metal expanding and contracting as the station moves from sunlight into shadow and back again. You can see it from the ground. On a clear evening, if you know when to look, the ISS appears as a bright dot moving steadily across the sky, brighter than most stars, brighter than many planets, visible for just a few minutes before it slips back into shadow or drops below the horizon. Thousands of people see it every night without knowing what it is. They might wish on it, thinking it's a star. They might mistake it for a satellite, which isn't wrong, though it's unlike any satellite humanity has ever built. It is not owned by one country. This is not an American station or a Russian station. It belongs to no single flag. It is shared, a collaboration, built and operated by multiple nations working together, not in competition, but in partnership. This distinction matters. In an age of nationalism and territorial disputes, the ISS stands as something different, a place where ownership is collective, where borders exist only in technical documentation, where the very concept of mine and yours becomes meaningless. Those nations include the United States, Russia, Japan, Canada, and 11 member states of the European Space Agency. Each contributed modules, equipment, expertise. Each sent astronauts. Each shared the cost and the dream. The collaboration required compromise, required trust, required the willingness to believe that former enemies could become partners, that people who once built weapons aimed at each other could instead build a home in space together. The station has been continuously occupied since the year 2000. For more than 20 years, there has not been a single day when humans were not living aboard. Crews rotate, but the presence remains, unbroken, constant. This fact alone is remarkable, that we have maintained a permanent human presence beyond Earth for over 2 decades, that somewhere above us always people are floating, working, breathing, living a life entirely unlike anything possible on the ground. It does not serve tourism. There have been visitors, private citizens who paid for the journey, but the ISS was not designed for leisure. It exists for research, for testing, for learning how to live beyond Earth. The work is quiet, repetitive, essential. There are no viewing platforms, no luxury suites, no recreational facilities. Every cubic meter of space serves a purpose. Every moment of crew time is scheduled. The station is a workplace, a laboratory, a proving ground for technologies that will someday carry humanity to worlds beyond our own. The station represents peaceful cooperation. In an age of tension and division, the ISS stands as something different. A place where former rivals share meals, share work, share the same fragile life support systems. It is not perfect. Disagreements arise. Technical problems strain relationships. Political tensions on Earth sometimes create difficulties in orbit. But the work continues, the partnership endures, and in that endurance lies a quiet testament to what humanity can achieve when we choose cooperation over conflict. Chapter 2. Why it was built. The ISS was designed for long-term human spaceflight. Before it existed, space missions lasted days or weeks. The longest stays aboard previous stations, Soviet Salyut and Mir, proved humans could survive months in orbit, but those stations were national projects, limited in scope and resources. The ISS made it possible for people from multiple nations to live in orbit for extended periods, to adapt, to endure, to see what the human body and mind could handle away from gravity. This wasn't curiosity for its own sake. This was preparation. Every day an astronaut spends aboard the ISS is a day humanity learns how to live somewhere other than Earth. It allows experiments impossible on Earth. When gravity disappears, everything changes. Flames burn differently. They form spheres instead of teardrops, because hot air doesn't rise when there's no up or down. Liquids behave strangely. They cling to surfaces through surface tension, forming wobbling globes that can be pushed through the air like soap bubbles. Crystals grow larger and more perfect because convection currents don't disturb their formation. The station became a laboratory where the rules of physics shifted just enough to reveal new truths. Scientists on Earth design experiments specifically for this environment, asking questions that can only be answered in microgravity. It studies the effects of microgravity on the human body. This research is crucial. Bones weaken in space. Astronauts can lose up to 2% of bone mass per month. Muscles shrink without the constant resistance gravity provides. Fluids shift upward, swelling faces and thinning legs, creating a characteristic puffy appearance that crew members develop within days of arrival. Vision changes. Many astronauts experience decreased visual acuity that sometimes persists after returning to Earth. Balance falters. The inner ear, which relies on gravity to determine orientation, sends confused signals to the brain. Understanding these effects is critical for future missions, for trips to the moon that might last weeks, to Mars that could last years. to places farther still where the human body will face challenges we can barely imagine. It helps prepare for those missions. Every day aboard the ISS is a test of technology, of endurance, of systems that must work without failure. Life support systems are refined through years of use, revealing weaknesses, inspiring improvements. Psychological protocols are developed based on how crews handle isolation, confinement, and the strange cocktail of boredom and stress that defines long-duration spaceflight. Equipment fails in unexpected ways, teaching engineers how to build more robust systems. Lessons learned in orbit will guide the ships and habitats of tomorrow. The station is a stepping stone, not a destination. It exists to teach us how to leave. It tests life support systems. How do you create breathable air in a sealed metal box hurtling through vacuum? The ISS recycles air constantly, scrubbing out carbon dioxide, adding oxygen split from water through electrolysis. How do you recycle water from every conceivable source? Sweat, breath, even urine. The station recovers approximately 93% of all water used aboard, purifying it to drinking standards. How do you grow food when there's no soil, no rain, no gravity to help roots find down and stems find up? Experiments in plant growth continue, learning which crops can thrive in these conditions. How do you store waste when nothing falls into a bin? How do you maintain comfortable temperatures when one side of the station bakes in sunlight while the other freezes in shadow? The ISS answers these questions through years of trial, adjustment, and refinement. Every answer brings us closer to the day when humans can live somewhere other than Earth, not for months, but for lifetimes. It encourages international collaboration. The station's existence required nations to set aside old grievances, to share technology that had previously been guarded as military secrets, to trust one another with the lives of their astronauts. American crew members depend on Russian life support. Russian cosmonauts depend on American power systems. European experiments are conducted in Japanese laboratories. Canadian robotics move equipment between modules built by different nations. This forced cooperation, even when politics on the ground grew tense. When international relations deteriorate, sanctions, accusations, conflicts, the ISS continues functioning because the stakes are too high for politics to interfere. People are living up there. They need air, water, food, power. The work continues regardless of what's happening in capital cities on Earth. It was born from Cold War space programs. Both the United States and the Soviet Union once dreamed of their own stations. Separate, competitive, symbols of dominance. The Americans planned freedom, a station that would demonstrate capitalist superiority. The Soviets planned Mir 2, a successor to their successful Mir station. Both nations poured resources into these separate visions, treating space as just another arena for ideological competition. But those dreams faded. The Soviet Union collapsed. Economic realities made solo projects unsustainable. What emerged instead was something shared. A station built not from rivalry, but from the ruins of it. The decision to combine efforts was pragmatic, born of budget constraints and political calculation. But pragmatism can produce beauty. The ISS stands as proof that even partnerships born of necessity can transcend their origins. It combines multiple station concepts. Early plans included components from Freedom and Mir 2, along with contributions from European and Japanese space agencies who had been developing their own modules. None of these individual stations was built. Instead, their ideas merged. Modules intended for separate stations became parts of one unified structure. The design process required countless compromises. Different nations had different standards, different connection systems, different electrical protocols. Making everything compatible required engineering ingenuity and diplomatic patience in equal measure. The result is a station that looks like it was designed by committee, because it was. But the heterogeneity became a strength. Different modules bring different capabilities. The diversity of design creates redundancy. If one system fails, another might compensate. It replaced competition with partnership. The handshake in orbit between American and Russian spacecraft during the Apollo-Soyuz mission in the 1970s hinted at this future. That brief docking was symbolic, a Cold War thaw made visible. The ISS made it real, permanent, a home in space that no single nation could claim. The shift from competition to cooperation didn't happen overnight. Years of negotiations, technical working groups, memoranda of understanding. Treaties signed and ratified, but gradually the partnership solidified. Engineers who once worked on opposite sides of the Iron Curtain began sharing designs. Astronauts who might have been enemies in another era began training together. The impossible became merely difficult. The difficult became routine. It was built piece by piece in orbit. No single launch could carry the entire station. The structure is too large, too massive. Instead, it arrived in sections. Modules launched separately over years, each piece travelling alone into orbit, waiting for the next piece to arrive. Slowly assembled, slowly connected. A puzzle constructed in the void where mistakes could not be undone. Every connection required precision. Alignment had to be perfect. Seals had to be airtight. Power cables had to be routed correctly. Data connections had to be tested. The margin for error was essentially zero. A misaligned module might never dock properly. A faulty seal could depressurize entire sections. The assembly process took over a decade and required hundreds of spacewalks, but gradually, inexorably, the station grew. Chapter 3: Building a Station in Space. Construction began in November of 1998. The first module, Zarya, launched from Kazakhstan atop a Russian Proton rocket. Zarya means sunrise in Russian, a fitting name for the beginning of something unprecedented. The module was Russian-built but American-funded, an early signal of the cooperative nature to come. Zarya provided initial power, storage and propulsion. It orbited alone for 2 weeks, systems running, awaiting the next piece. The next piece arrived when Space Shuttle Endeavour carried Unity, an American-built node, into orbit. The shuttle's crew used the orbiter's robotic arm to connect Unity to Zarya. The first connection, the foundation of everything that followed. Inside Unity, heaters, cables, and equipment awaited activation. The station existed now, not complete, barely functional, but real. 2 modules connected. The beginning of a structure that would eventually stretch the length of a football field and weigh more than 400 tons. Modules launched separately over the following years. Some travelled aboard Russian rockets, others rode in the cargo bay of American space shuttles. Each arrival was an event. Ground teams tracked the launch vehicle. Crews aboard the station prepared for docking. Cameras monitored the approach. When the new module made contact, latches closed, seals pressurized, and astronauts began the delicate work of integration. Power connections, data lines, ventilation ducts. Every system had to be linked, tested, certified. Nothing could be left to chance. The station was assembled in orbit by astronauts and robotic arms working in concert. Some connections could be made automatically, modules docking under computer control. Others required human intervention. Astronauts floated outside in spacesuits, tools, tethered to their bodies, working in the silence of vacuum. They secured bolts that automated systems couldn't reach. They routed cables through spaces too tight for robots. They inspected seals, tested connections, verified that everything met specification. Inside, other crew members operated Canadarm2, the massive robotic arm that became the station's most essential tool. The arm could grasp modules, position them for docking, move equipment, even serve as a mobile platform for spacewalking astronauts. Assembly required hundreds of spacewalks. The exact number depends on how you count. Some were brief, others lasted over 7 hours. Astronauts trained for months before each spacewalk. On Earth, they practiced in massive pools containing full-scale mock-ups of station components. Wearing weighted spacesuits, they could simulate the weightlessness of space while instructors watched, offering guidance, identifying mistakes before those mistakes could occur in orbit where consequences might be fatal. Every spacewalk carried risk. Spacesuits are miniature spacecraft. complex machines that maintain pressure, provide oxygen, regulate temperature and protect against radiation. They can fail. Gloves can develop leaks. Cooling systems can malfunction. Visors can fog. And beyond these mechanical risks lies the simple danger of the environment itself. Space doesn't forgive inattention. A moment's carelessness, a dropped tool, a misplaced tether, these small errors can cascade into catastrophe. Yet the work had to be done. The station could not be built from inside. Astronauts accepted the risk because the alternative was leaving the station incomplete, its potential unrealized. Robotic arms assisted assembly but could not do everything. Canadarm2, provided by the Canadian Space Agency, became indispensable. Stretching over 17 meters when fully extended, the arm could manipulate objects massing thousands of kilograms. It moved modules into position, positioned platforms for spacewalkers, captured arriving cargo ships, even relocated itself by walking from one attachment point to another. Controllers operated the arm from inside the station, watching through cameras, moving slowly and deliberately. One mistake could damage expensive equipment or endanger crew members, but the system worked remarkably well. Over thousands of operations, Canadarm2 proved its worth again and again. Each module was carefully connected according to plans developed years in advance. Structure mattered. The station had to balance, not in terms of gravity, but in terms of distribution of mass, power requirements, and thermal management. Engineers calculated how sunlight would strike different surfaces, how solar panels should be oriented, how radiators should be positioned to shed heat efficiently. The station had to function as a unified system, despite being assembled from components built by different nations using different standards. American modules used one type of electrical connector. Russian modules used another. Adapters bridged these gaps. Converters transformed voltages. Everything had to work together, and remarkably it did. Power systems were added gradually. Solar panels arrived folded in cargo bays, then unfurled in space like massive origami. Each array stretched longer than a city bus, covered in photovoltaic cells that converted sunlight into electricity. The panels rotated to track the sun as the station orbited, maximizing power generation. Batteries stored energy for the 45 minutes of each orbit when Earth's shadow blocked the sun. Power distribution systems carried electricity throughout the station. As more modules were added, power requirements grew. More solar arrays were installed. The station grew brighter, more capable, able to support more experiments, more crew, more life. Mistakes had no easy fixes. Unlike construction on Earth, there was no running to a hardware store for replacement parts. No calling in additional workers, no overtime to make up for delays. Every problem required creative solutions, improvisation within the constraints of available materials, patience while ground teams calculated options. Some problems defied immediate solution and simply had to be accepted, worked around, managed. A leaking seal might be patched rather than replaced. A malfunctioning sensor might be bypassed. Redundancy built into critical systems saved the station multiple times when primary equipment failed and backups took over. Assembly took over a decade. The first module launched in 1998. The station was declared complete in 2011. 13 years from start to finish. Dozens of launches. Thousands of hours of spacewalks. Millions of hours of planning, training and coordination. A monument to persistence. To the belief that large-scale projects, even incredibly complex ones conducted in the harshest environment imaginable, can succeed if enough people commit to making them succeed. The ISS stands as proof of that commitment. Crews lived aboard during construction. This wasn't originally planned. Early concepts assumed the station would be built first, then occupied. But schedules changed, budgets shifted. It became clear that having crew aboard would actually accelerate construction. Astronauts could assist with assembly, conduct early experiments, maintain systems that otherwise might degrade. So people moved in while the station was still incomplete. They lived in partially finished modules, slept in construction zones, helped build the place they called home. A strange existence, residing in a construction site that never closed, where new rooms appeared every few months, where the very layout of your home changed as new modules were added. Constant upgrades followed completion. The station is never truly finished. Old equipment wears out and must be replaced. New experiments require new hardware, refrigerators for biological samples, furnaces for materials research, microscopes, spectrometers, cameras. Technology improves. Equipment that seemed cutting edge at launch becomes obsolete. Upgrades arrive with every resupply ship. The station evolves. What orbits Earth today contains components from every era of its existence. Modules from the late 1990s still function alongside equipment installed last month. This patchwork creates challenges for engineers who must maintain systems spanning multiple generations of technology, but it also creates opportunities. The station adapts, grows, changes in response to new needs and new possibilities. Modules came from different nations, each designed to national standards, each reflecting the engineering priorities and aesthetic sensibilities of its builders. Zarya and Zvezda from Russia, cylindrical, compact, efficient. Unity and Destiny from the United States, larger, more spacious, filled with rack-mounted equipment. Columbus from Europe, a laboratory optimized for multidisciplinary research. Kibo from Japan, the largest single module with its own external platform for experiments that need direct exposure to space. Each module tells a story, each bears the marks of its origin, yet all function together, interconnected, interdependent. Engineering required extreme precision. Tolerances measured in millimeters mattered when modules built on different continents had to dock perfectly in orbit. Temperatures ranging from freezing shadow to searing sunlight, swings of hundreds of degrees, meant materials had to expand and contract without cracking or warping. Radiation constantly battering every surface required shielding, careful placement of sensitive electronics, acceptance that some components would degrade over time. Meteoroid impacts, though rare, posed a constant threat. The station incorporated shielding layers designed to vaporize small particles before they could breach pressure hulls. Nothing could be left to chance. Everything had to be tested, verified, tested again. The station is still evolving today. New modules have been proposed. Russia has discussed adding additional segments. Private companies have expressed interest in attaching commercial modules, creating space for manufacturing experiments or even tourism. The station that orbits Earth now is not the same one that launched in 1998. It has grown, aged, changed, and it continues to change, adapting to new missions, new capabilities, new dreams. Chapter 4. Who runs the ISS? The station is operated by NASA, the American Space Agency that oversees much of the station's daily operations, coordinates schedules, manages experiments, and maintains constant communication with astronauts. But NASA does not work alone. The ISS is a partnership, and that partnership is reflected in every aspect of operations. Mission Control in Houston monitors American segments. Mission Control in Moscow monitors Russian segments. Other agencies contribute as well. Europe, Japan, Canada all maintain oversight of their components. Decision-making requires coordination across time zones, languages, and organizational cultures. The Russian segment is managed by Roscosmos, the Russian space agency. Russia operates its own modules with their own life support, their own power systems, their own protocols. This division is functional, not political. The Russian modules were designed to Russian standards. They use Russian connectors, Russian software, Russian procedures. Cosmonauts train differently than astronauts. They focus on different skills, different systems, yet the segments connect. Air flows between them. Crew members move freely. The division exists on organizational charts but blurs in daily life aboard the station. Europe is represented by the European Space Agency, which contributed the Columbus Laboratory module and the automated transfer vehicle cargo spacecraft that supplied the station, until 2014. ESA provides astronauts, highly trained individuals from member nations who undergo the same rigorous selection and training as their American and Russian counterparts. ESA funds research, coordinates experiments, shares in decision-making processes. Europe's involvement ensures the station remains truly international, prevents it from becoming solely an American-Russian project. Japan contributes through JAXA, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency. JAXA built Kibo, the Japanese experiment module, the largest single module on the station. Kibo includes a pressurized laboratory, a storage module, and an external exposed platform where experiments can be conducted in the vacuum of space. Japanese astronauts have lived aboard the station for extended periods, conducting research in fields ranging from biology to materials science to Earth observation. JAXA's contributions demonstrate that space exploration need not be the exclusive domain of the two nations that dominated the early space race. Canada provides robotics, Canadarm2 and Dexter, a smaller, more precise robotic manipulator. These tools are essential to station operations. Without them, assembly would have been far more difficult. Maintenance would require more spacewalks, each carrying additional risk. Cargo handling would be slower and more dangerous. Canada's contribution may seem narrow, just robotics, but it's critical. The arms are used almost daily. They've become so integral to operations that it's hard to imagine the station functioning without them. Shared decision-making governs the station. No single nation can dictate policy unilaterally. Major decisions, adding new modules, decommissioning old ones, changing operational procedures, require consensus among partners. This slows things down considerably. An idea proposed by NASA might take months or years to gain approval from all partners, but this deliberate pace also ensures fairness, balance. No nation dominates. No nation is left out. The process may be frustrating for those who want rapid change, but it maintains the collaborative spirit that makes the station work. Different modules follow different rules, creating complexity. The Russian segment operates under Russian protocols, different procedures for emergencies, different maintenance schedules, different ways of documenting work. The American segment follows American protocols. European and Japanese modules add their own variations. Astronauts must learn all these systems. American crew members train on Russian equipment. Russian cosmonauts train on American equipment. Everyone learns everyone else's procedures. This cross-training takes time but creates flexibility. If an emergency arises, any crew member can assist in any module. Crews follow unified schedules despite the divisions. Daily life aboard the ISS follows a shared timeline developed through negotiation among partner agencies. Wake times, meal times, exercise, periods, work blocks, personal time, sleep periods, all coordinated. This schedule is posted weeks in advance, meticulously planned to balance research needs, maintenance requirements, exercise time, and the simple human need for rest. Deviations occur, emergencies, unexpected repairs, visiting spacecraft that require crew attention, but the schedule provides structure, prevents chaos, ensures that the many competing demands on crew time don't overwhelm the people living aboard. Language coordination is required constantly. English and Russian serve as the station's official languages. Most astronauts speak both with varying degrees of fluency. Commands, procedures, documentation, all exist in both languages. Communication flows constantly between crew members, between the station and ground control in Houston, between the station and ground control in Moscow. Misunderstandings can be dangerous. A misinterpreted instruction during a spacewalk could lead to a fatal error. A miscommunication about a system malfunction could delay critical repairs. So crew members learn each other's languages, they practice, they verify, they confirm that messages are understood correctly. This linguistic juggling adds another layer of complexity to an already complex operation, but it's necessary. The station cannot function without clear communication. Science crosses borders effortlessly. Experiments conducted in the European Columbus module might use equipment from the Japanese Kibo laboratory. Data collected by American instruments might be analysed by Russian scientists. Research papers list authors from multiple nations. The science itself is collaborative, shared, open. This wasn't guaranteed. Early fears suggested that nations might hoard data, restrict access, turn the station into another arena for competition. But those fears proved largely unfounded. The research community operates by different rules than politicians. Scientists share data because science advances through sharing. The ISS demonstrates this principle daily. Knowledge gained in orbit belongs to humanity, not to individual nations. Chapter 5. Life in Microgravity. Astronauts float instead of walk. There is no floor to push against, no ceiling to avoid. Directions lose meaning. What's up for one crew member might be sideways for another working in the same module. They push off walls to move through the station, gliding effortlessly from place to place. A gentle push can send you across an entire module. Too hard a push, and you'll impact the far wall with bruising force. Crew members learn quickly to moderate their movements, to calculate trajectories instinctively. Movement becomes a kind of three-dimensional dance, graceful and strange. Sleeping requires restraints. Without gravity, bodies drift. Arms float upward, legs drift apart. Without something to hold you in place, you'd wake to find yourself bumping against walls or floating near the ceiling. Astronauts sleep in sleeping bags attached to walls or inside small crew quarters, private spaces barely larger than phone booths. They zip themselves in, strap down, close their eyes. There's no lying down, no soft mattress, just floating in place, secured against drift, while the station hums quietly around them. Some astronauts report that sleeping in space feels oddly freeing. Others find it takes weeks to adjust to the lack of a bed, the absence of the familiar sensation of weight pressing you into softness. Food is carefully packaged for obvious reasons. Crumbs are dangerous in microgravity. They float, get inhaled, clog equipment, lodge in places they shouldn't, so bread is forbidden. Meals come in sealed pouches, dehydrated food that crew members rehydrate with hot water, or thermostabilized meals in pouches that can be heated. Everything is eaten with a spoon or squeezed directly into the mouth. Flavor is muted because microgravity affects taste. Fluid shifts cause nasal congestion, dulling the sense of smell and therefore taste. Astronauts tend to prefer spicier foods. Salt and pepper exist only as liquids. Salt water, pepper sauce, because granules would float away. Eating becomes a deliberate act, slower than on Earth, requiring focus to ensure nothing escapes the pouch. There is no up or down, a disorientation that takes days to overcome. On Earth, gravity defines orientation. We know instinctively which way is down. Our inner ears tell us. Our bodies feel it constantly. In microgravity, those signals vanish. The inner ear, confused by the absence of gravitational cues, sends conflicting information to the brain. Many astronauts experience space adaptation syndrome, nausea, disorientation, sometimes vomiting, during their first few days in orbit. The brain eventually adapts, learns to ignore the false signals. Within a week, most crew members feel normal again. They can work on what Earth dwellers would call the ceiling without any sense of wrongness. The body accepts the new reality. Orientation becomes arbitrary, chosen for convenience rather than imposed by physics. Exercise is required daily, 2 hours, minimum, 6 days a week. Without it, the body deteriorates rapidly. Muscles atrophy when they're not working against resistance. On Earth, simply standing requires effort. Legs, back, core muscles, all work constantly against gravity. In space, that effort vanishes. Within weeks, astronauts lose strength. Their hearts shrink slightly because they are not pumping blood against gravity. Their cardiovascular fitness declines. Exercise slows this deterioration but cannot stop it entirely. The station includes treadmills where astronauts run while strapped down by bungee cords. Resistance machines that provide the load muscles need to maintain strength. Stationary bikes. Crew members sweat through their workouts, then wipe themselves down with towels because shower water would simply float away in spherical globules. Muscles weaken, noticeably without constant use. Astronauts returning from 6-month missions often need assistance walking when they first land. Their legs shake, their balance is poor, they've lost muscle mass despite hours of daily exercise. Recovery takes time, weeks or months of physical therapy, gradually rebuilding strength, retraining the body to work against gravity again. Longer missions mean longer recovery. This poses a serious challenge for future Mars missions, which might last years. Crew members arriving at Mars after months in space would be weakened, potentially unable to perform the physical tasks that Martian exploration will require. Understanding and mitigating muscle loss remains a critical area of research. Bones lose density at an alarming rate. Astronauts can lose 1 to 2% of bone mass per month in space, primarily in the hips, spine, and legs, weight-bearing bones that aren't bearing weight anymore. The skeleton, no longer stressed by gravity, sheds calcium. Astronauts take supplements. They exercise vigorously. They accept that bone loss is inevitable. Long-duration missions require careful monitoring through regular bone density scans. Medication helps somewhat. Recovery after returning to Earth is slow and incomplete. Some astronauts never fully regain the bone density they lost. For missions to Mars, which might last 2 to 3 years, bone loss could become debilitating. Solutions are being sought: higher intensity exercise, better medications, perhaps even artificial gravity through rotating spacecraft sections. But for now, bone loss remains one of the most serious health consequences of long-duration spaceflight. Water floats in spheres, a simple consequence of surface tension overcoming gravity. Pour water in microgravity and it doesn't fall. It forms a wobbling ball, held together by molecular forces. These water spheres can be quite large, several centimeters across, before they become unstable and break apart. Drinking requires either a straw to suck water from a container, or in rare demonstrations, careful manipulation of floating water blobs directly into the mouth. Washing is done with damp cloths and no-rinse soap. Crew members wet a cloth, wipe themselves down, use another cloth to remove the soap. Showers are impossible. The water wouldn't fall to a drain. It would simply float around the module, forming thousands of droplets that would coat surfaces, get into equipment, cause problems, so crew members accept a different standard of cleanliness. They wash frequently but never quite feel as clean as they would on Earth. Hygiene is adapted for the realities of the space environment. No running water, no bathtubs, no showers. Astronauts use no-rinse shampoo, rubbing it into their hair, then toweling it away. They brush their teeth, but can't spit into a sink. They either swallow the toothpaste or spit into a towel. Towels collect moisture, become damp, are hung up to dry in the ventilation flow. When they're too dirty to use anymore, they're discarded, packed into cargo ships that will burn up on re-entry. Personal grooming requires creativity. Trimming hair or nails risks creating floating debris. Crew members often do this near ventilation returns where airflow will capture the clippings. Cleanliness matters not just for comfort, but for health. In a closed environment, bacteria and fungi can spread easily. Maintaining hygiene prevents illness that could jeopardize missions. Toilets aboard the ISS use airflow because waste doesn't fall. The toilet is essentially a vacuum device. Urine collection uses a funnel attached to a hose, with suction pulling everything into a collection tank. The liquid waste is eventually processed for water recovery. Solid waste requires sitting on a small opening, much smaller than a standard toilet, with airflow pulling everything into a collection bag. It's not pleasant. The system breaks down regularly. Repairs can be awkward and unpleasant, but it works well enough. Astronauts train extensively on Earth using toilet mock-ups. They practice getting the alignment right. They learn the procedures, because in space, even using the bathroom requires careful attention. Clothing is worn longer than anyone on Earth would consider acceptable. Laundry machines are too heavy and use too much water to be practical for the space station. So clothes are worn for days, sometimes weeks. Shirts might be worn for a week, socks for several days. Underwear gets changed more frequently but still worn longer than on Earth. When clothes become too dirty or too smelly, they're discarded, packed into cargo ships that have delivered supplies. Those ships, no longer needed, are filled with trash and sent to burn up in Earth's atmosphere. It's wasteful but necessary. Storage is limited. There's no place to keep dirty laundry, so clothes are disposable, one-time use over extended periods, then incinerated in the crucible of re-entry. Sound travels differently in the station's pressurized environment. Air conducts sound, but in a sealed metal environment, everything echoes strangely. Voices carry through ventilation ducts, audible in modules far away. Equipment hums constantly. Computers, fans, pumps, air circulation systems, all creating a low, persistent background noise that becomes the acoustic signature of the station. It's never silent. Even at night during sleep periods, the equipment continues running. Fans must circulate air, or carbon dioxide would accumulate around sleeping astronauts' faces, potentially suffocating them. The constant hum bothers some crew members initially. Others find it comforting after a while, a mechanical lullaby that marks the station as functioning normally. Movement is slow and controlled throughout the station. Rush and you'll bounce off walls, potentially injuring yourself or damaging equipment. Lose your grip on a handhold, and you'll drift helplessly until you reach something solid. There's no friction to slow you down, no gravity to pull you back to the floor. Astronauts move deliberately, gently, every motion calculated. They plan their trajectories, push off with just the right force, aim for specific handholds, grab and stabilize. It becomes second nature after a while, but it never becomes casual. Carelessness in microgravity can have consequences. A crew member who pushes off too hard might impact equipment with enough force to break it, might collide with another crew member, might injure themselves, so they move slowly, carefully, with constant awareness of their trajectory and the positions of everything around them. Quiet dominates most of the station despite the equipment noise. There are no crowds, no traffic, no sirens or honking horns, just the hum of machinery and the occasional voice on the radio from mission control. It's peaceful in a way few places on Earth ever are. Isolated, removed from the chaos of modern life. Some astronauts cherish this tranquility. Others find the isolation oppressive. 6 people sharing a space the size of a large house, yet often working alone in different modules, sometimes going hours without seeing another person. The loneliness can be profound. Video calls with family help, email messages from friends. But there's an essential aloneness to life in orbit, a separation from Earth that no amount of communication can fully bridge. Routine provides stability in this strange existence. Wake at a set time, morning inspection of critical systems, exercise, breakfast, work block scheduled down to 5-minute increments, lunch, more work, exercise again, dinner, personal time, sleep, repeat. The structure keeps astronauts grounded, metaphorically, since literally they float. Without routine, the days would blur together. Without structure, the isolation could become overwhelming. The monotony can wear on crew members. Every day similar to the last, same walls, same faces, same view out. The windows, though the view never quite becomes ordinary. But the routine is necessary. It provides rhythm to life in a place where even day and night lose meaning when the sun rises and sets 16 times every 24 hours. Chapter 6. Science. In orbit. Thousands of experiments have been conducted aboard the ISS since occupation began. The exact number is hard to pin down. Some experiments run for days, others for years. Some generate reams of data, others produce a handful of observations, but collectively they represent an unprecedented accumulation of knowledge about how things behave in microgravity. Biology, physics, materials science, medicine, Earth observation, astronomy. The station serves as a laboratory unlike any other, and the research done here shapes our understanding of the universe and our place in it. Biology is studied in weightlessness because living things evolved under gravity's constant influence. How do cells grow and divide when that influence is removed? Do they behave differently? Early experiments show that some bacteria become more virulent in space. They develop thicker protective walls, become more resistant to antibiotics. This discovery has implications for both space travel and medicine on Earth. Other experiments examine how plants grow without gravitational cues to guide root and stem orientation. Plants aboard the ISS use other signals, light, moisture gradients, to determine which direction to grow. Understanding these mechanisms could improve agricultural practices on Earth and make it possible to grow food on future missions to Mars. Plants have been grown in space for years now, not just as experiments, but increasingly as supplements to crew diet. Lettuce grows well in the station's plant growth chambers. Radishes have been harvested. Peppers, even flowers, which serve no nutritional purpose but boost crew morale. Growing food in space presents challenges. Without soil, roots must be supported by other media. Water must be delivered precisely. Too much, and roots rot too little, and plants wither. Lighting must be optimized for photosynthesis, but the challenges are being overcome. Each successful harvest brings humanity closer to the day when space travelers can grow significant portions of their own food, reducing dependence on resupply from Earth. Fluids behave differently in microgravity, following rules that seem counterintuitive to anyone accustomed to Earth's environment. Without gravity to pull liquids downward, surface tension becomes the dominant force. Liquids cling to surfaces. They form spheres when floating freely. They don't pour from containers, they must be squeezed or sucked out. This has practical implications for spacecraft design. Fuel tanks must be designed so propellant doesn't float away from the pumps. Cooling systems must account for liquids that won't naturally settle. Understanding fluid dynamics in microgravity helps engineers design better systems, makes spacecraft more reliable, safer. Fire burns unpredictably without gravity, a fact that makes it one of the most dangerous threats aboard the station. Flames on Earth are teardrop-shaped because hot combustion gases rise, pulling fresh oxygen into the base of the flame. In microgravity, there's no rising. Hot gases don't ascend. Flames become spherical, fed by oxygen diffusing toward them from all directions. They burn cooler than on Earth, often produce more smoke. Extinguishing them can be difficult because traditional fire suppression techniques assume flames will rise. The ISS includes sophisticated fire detection and suppression systems. Crew members train extensively on fire response. Because a fire aboard the station could be catastrophic, there's nowhere to evacuate except into spacesuits or escape capsules. Studying combustion in space improves fire safety both in orbit and on Earth, leading to better understanding of flame behavior and more effective suppression. Techniques. Materials are tested for durability in the harsh space environment. Radiation bombardment from cosmic rays and solar particles degrades polymers, makes metals brittle over time. Extreme temperature swings, from over 100 degrees Celsius in sunlight to minus 150 degrees in shadow, cause expansion and contraction that can crack or warp materials. Atomic oxygen in the tenuous upper atmosphere slowly erodes surfaces. Testing materials aboard the ISS reveals which ones can survive long-term exposure to these conditions. This knowledge guides the design of satellites, spacecraft, and future space stations. Materials that fail in these tests are replaced in designs. Materials that survive inform future construction. Medical research improves Earth health through discoveries made in microgravity. Bone loss in space resembles osteoporosis, so treatments developed for astronauts might help elderly patients on Earth. Muscle wasting in space mirrors. Muscle wasting diseases. Immune system changes in space provide insights into immune function. Cancer research benefits particularly from experiments in microgravity. Tumors grow differently without gravity's influence, sometimes faster, sometimes in different shapes. Studying these differences helps researchers understand cancer growth mechanisms, potentially leading to new treatments. Protein crystals grow more perfectly in microgravity than on Earth, and this seemingly esoteric finding has profound medical implications. Proteins are the molecular machines of life. Understanding their three-dimensional structure is crucial for designing drugs that interact with them. But determining protein structure requires growing crystals large and pure enough for X-ray crystallography. On Earth, gravity causes convection currents in the crystal growth solution. These currents disturb the forming crystals, introducing defects. In microgravity, convection disappears. Crystals grow larger, more orderly, with fewer defects. This has led to breakthroughs in understanding diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. Drugs designed based on protein structures determined from space-grown crystals are now in use, treating real patients, saving lives. This alone might justify the station's existence, that research conducted in a laboratory orbiting Earth has direct, measurable benefits for people who will never leave the planet. Climate is monitored from the station's unique vantage point. Instruments measure atmospheric gases, carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor. Cameras track hurricanes from formation to dissipation, providing data that improves forecasting models. Ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica are photographed regularly, documenting their retreat. Deforestation in the Amazon is visible in stark before and after images. The station provides a platform for Earth observation that complements satellite networks, offering human observers who can target instruments quickly when unexpected events occur and can provide context that automated systems might miss. Earth is observed continuously by crew members who have time allocated specifically for photographing the planet below. They capture cities at night, glowing networks of light revealing human settlement patterns, natural phenomena, volcanic eruptions, lightning storms, aurora, coastlines, mountain ranges, deserts, forests. The photographic archive built by astronauts over 2 decades documents Earth's transformation. Comparison of images taken years apart shows lakes drying up, cities expanding, glaciers receding. This visual record serves science, education, and perhaps something deeper, a growing awareness of our planet's fragility, its beauty, its singularity. Space radiation is measured continuously because understanding radiation exposure is critical for future long-duration missions. Beyond Earth's protective magnetosphere, radiation levels increase dramatically. Cosmic rays from distant supernova, solar particles ejected during solar storms, both pose risks to astronauts. The ISS orbits within Earth's magnetosphere, so crew members experience lower radiation than they would on a trip to Mars, but they still receive exposure higher than on Earth's surface. Instruments measure this constantly. Dosimeters track accumulation. Data builds the foundation for radiation safety protocols for future missions, helps engineers design better shielding, helps mission planners calculate exposure limits. The goal is not to eliminate risk, that's impossible, but to understand it well enough to manage it. Human adaptation is studied through the astronauts themselves. Every crew member is a test subject, their vision tested regularly, bone density scanned, blood drawn for analysis, cognitive function assessed through computerized tests, sleep monitored, diet tracked, exercise logged. The data collected builds a comprehensive picture of how humans change during long-duration spaceflight, what adapts, what deteriorates, what can be mitigated through countermeasures. This research is essential for planning missions beyond low Earth orbit. A Mars mission might last 3 years, 6 months travelling there, 1.5 years on the surface, 6 months returning. Crew members need to arrive healthy enough to explore, return healthy enough to survive re-entry and landing. Current research suggests this is possible, but barely. More work is needed. The ISS provides the platform for that work. Data is shared worldwide according to agreements made when the station was designed. Research results are published in scientific journals, made available to other researchers, incorporated into textbooks. The knowledge gained doesn't belong to any single nation. It belongs to humanity. This openness wasn't guaranteed. Some feared that nations would classify research, hide results, use the station to gain competitive advantages. But the scientific community operates by different norms than politicians or military planners. Scientists share because sharing accelerates discovery, because verification requires independent replication, because knowledge grows through exchange, not hoarding. The ISS has largely lived up to this ideal. Not perfectly. Some research remains proprietary, especially when commercial companies fund experiments. But broadly, the station has been a platform for open science. demonstrating that international cooperation in research benefits everyone. Experiments repeat daily in many cases, building data sets over months or years. Science requires repetition. A single observation proves little. 100 observations start to reveal patterns. 1,000 observations allow statistical analysis. Some experiments run continuously, monitoring equipment that never stops collecting data. Others run in batches, cell cultures grown, observed, harvested, then the process repeats with slight variations. The patient accumulation of data defines much of the scientific work aboard the station. It's not glamorous. Individual data points are rarely exciting, but collectively they build understanding, slowly, patiently, one observation at a time. Knowledge accumulates slowly in this environment, but it accumulates. No single experiment changes everything. No dramatic breakthrough occurs overnight. But over years, the small discoveries add up. Insights emerge. Patterns become clear. What once seemed impossible becomes merely difficult. What seemed difficult becomes routine. The ISS serves as humanity's laboratory for learning to live beyond Earth. Every lesson learned there brings us incrementally closer to the day when living in space is not a risky adventure undertaken by a tiny elite, but an ordinary option available to anyone willing to make the journey. That day remains distant, but it grows closer with every experiment conducted, every data point collected, every hour logged in microgravity. Chapter 7. Moving around Earth. The ISS orbits Earth every 90 minutes, completing 16 full circuits every 24 hours. This speed is necessary. Any slower, and the station would fall. Any faster, and it would escape into a higher orbit. The velocity is exact, calculated to maintain a stable orbit at approximately 400 kilometers altitude. At this speed and altitude, the station remains in what's called a circular orbit, though in reality the orbit wobbles slightly due to Earth's irregular gravitational field and atmospheric drag. The crew sees 16 sunrises and sunsets per day, a rhythm utterly alien to human experience. Every 90 minutes, the station emerges from Earth's shadow into brilliant sunlight. The sun appears suddenly on the horizon, not gradually as on Earth. Within seconds, the windows blaze with light. Solar panels track the sun, rotating to maintain optimal angles. Then, 45 minutes later, the station enters eclipse again. Darkness returns, instantly. Stars appear. Cities glow below. This cycle continues endlessly, never pausing. Day and night lose meaning. Crew members' circadian rhythms, evolved over millions of years to follow a 24-hour cycle, struggle to adapt. Sleep can be difficult. The station's official schedule follows Greenwich Mean Time, providing structure, but the body knows something is wrong. Light at the wrong times, darkness when there should be day. Many astronauts report sleep disturbances throughout their missions. The station moves at approximately 28,000 kilometers per hour, though this figure varies slightly as the orbit is adjusted. This speed is beyond human intuition. Fast enough to cross the United States coast to coast in about 10 minutes. Fast enough that a complete orbit takes less time than many people's morning commute. And yet, inside the station, there's no sensation of motion, no wind resistance, no centrifugal force pulling you against the walls, just stillness. The view through the windows changes constantly, oceans giving way to continents, deserts to forests, day to night and back again. But the motion itself is imperceptible. The station might as well be stationary, hovering motionless while Earth rotates beneath it. Gravity still exists at the station's altitude, a fact that surprises many people who imagine space as a place without gravity. But gravitational force decreases with distance only gradually. At 400 kilometers up, gravity is still about 90% as strong as on Earth's surface. The station is pulled downward just as surely as anything on the ground. So why don't astronauts feel weight? Weightlessness comes from continuous free fall. The station is falling toward Earth constantly, but it's moving forward so fast that it keeps missing the planet. It falls around Earth, endlessly. The astronauts inside are falling too, at exactly the same rate as the station itself. Everything falls together. The walls, the equipment, the people. Since everything falls at the same rate, nothing falls relative to anything else. This is weightlessness. Not the absence of gravity, but the inability to feel gravity's pull, because everything around you is falling with you. It's the same sensation you'd feel in an elevator if the cable snapped. That brief moment of free fall before impact. Except the ISS never impacts. It just keeps falling forever. The orbit is occasionally boosted to counteract the slow decay caused by atmospheric drag. Even at 400 kilometers altitude, traces of atmosphere remain. Molecules of oxygen and nitrogen so sparse that they barely exist, yet still present. As the station plows through this tenuous gas at 28,000 kilometers per hour, drag slows it infinitesimally. Not much, just a little. But over days and weeks, this drag pulls the station lower, closer to thicker atmosphere, closer to where drag increases. If uncorrected, this process would eventually end with the station re-entering the atmosphere and burning up. To prevent this, the orbit is boosted regularly. Russian Progress cargo ships dock to the station, fire their engines. The station accelerates slightly. The orbit rises. Decay is reversed, at least temporarily. Atmospheric drag slowly pulls the station downward despite these corrections, a reminder that the ISS exists on the boundary between space and not space. The upper atmosphere is thin but not absent. It exerts force, applies friction, steals energy from the station's motion. Every moment in orbit, the station loses a tiny amount of velocity to this drag. The loss is measured, tracked, predicted. Orbital mechanics allow ground controllers to calculate exactly when the next boost will be needed, usually every few months, sometimes more frequently during periods of high solar activity, when Earth's upper atmosphere expands and becomes slightly denser. Thrusters maintain altitude through brief firings that barely perturb the station but cumulatively prevent orbital decay. Progress cargo ships provide propulsion. So do European ATV vehicles when they were in service. American vehicles can also provide thrust when needed. The maneuvers are gentle. Astronauts barely feel the acceleration. Equipment doesn't shift. Nothing dramatic happens. But the orbital altitude increases by a few kilometers, buying more time before the next correction becomes necessary. Docking spacecraft arrive regularly with supplies, equipment, and crew. The approach is carefully choreographed. The incoming vehicle matches the station's speed and trajectory, approaches from below and behind, moves closer over hours, not minutes. Cameras on the station and the vehicle monitor the approach. Ground controllers watch telemetry. Cosmonauts or astronauts supervise, ready to take manual control if automated systems fail. The final contact is gentle. Latches engage, seals press together, then the docking mechanism pulls the vehicles firmly together. Pressure equalizes, hatches open, crew members float through, greeted by those already aboard. Departures follow the reverse process. Hatches close, seals engage. The vehicle separates and backs away using small thrusters. Distance increases slowly. Once safely clear, the departing craft fires engines to drop out of orbit. For cargo ships filled with trash, this means a fiery end, re-entry over the Pacific, breakup at high altitude, any surviving fragments falling into empty ocean. For crew capsules, it means a controlled descent. Heat shield forward, enduring the thermal crucible of re-entry, then parachutes deploy and the capsule drifts down to landing. Either way, the station continues, always occupied, always moving, always home to someone. Chapter 8. Arriving and Leaving. Crews arrive via spacecraft that represent the culmination of decades of engineering and refinement. For years, Russian Soyuz capsules were the only option. 3 seats, cramped. Interior, proven reliability built on 50 years of spaceflight. The Soyuz launches from Kazakhstan atop a rocket whose design traces back to the early space age. The ascent takes about 8.5 minutes from liftoff to orbit. Then begins the journey to the station. sometimes as quick as 6 hours using a fast rendezvous trajectory, sometimes 2 days following a more conservative approach. Cosmonauts and astronauts wait in their seats, unable to move much, monitoring systems, watching Earth through small windows. When docking occurs, it's a relief. The long compression can end, hatches open, crew members float into the station, greeted with smiles and embraces by those already aboard. SpaceX Crew Dragon now provides an alternative, representing a new era of commercial spaceflight. The Dragon capsule is larger than Soyuz, sleeker in design, with touchscreen controls instead of analog switches. It launches from Florida atop a Falcon rocket. The approach is similar, but the experience reportedly different. The interior more spacious, the ride smoother, the re-entry less punishing. Both vehicles are reliable, both carry crews safely. The availability of 2 independent systems increases flexibility, allows more frequent crew rotations, provides redundancy if one vehicle is grounded. Cargo ships resupply the station every few months, arriving with everything needed to sustain life and work in orbit. Russian Progress ships bring food, water, fuel, equipment. American Dragon and Northrop Grumman Cygnus vehicles carry similar loads. European ATVs, no longer flying, once brought massive amounts of supplies. Japanese HTV vehicles, also retired, were known for their large cargo capacity. Each ship is carefully packed, food with long shelf life, water for drinking and oxygen generation, spare parts for equipment that might fail, new experiments to be installed, fresh clothing because laundry is impossible, personal items requested by crew, letters from family, favourite foods, books. The arrival of a cargo ship is always welcome. Fresh supplies mean new meals, breaking the monotony of recycled menu items. New equipment means new experiments, new capabilities. Letters and personal items provide connection to Earth, reminders of home. Missions last approximately 6 months for most crew members. This duration balances multiple considerations. 6 months is long enough to adapt fully to microgravity, to contribute meaningfully to station operations, to conduct substantial research. It's not so long that health risks become unmanageable, or that psychological strain breaks crew members. Longer missions are possible. Some astronauts have stayed nearly a year, but 6 months has become the standard. Crew members arrive, spend time overlapping with the crew they're replacing, learning systems, being briefed on ongoing work. Then the old crew departs. The new crew settles into routines. 6 months pass. Seasons change on Earth below, barely noticed in orbit. Then new arrivals appear. The cycle repeats. Some astronauts have stayed longer than 6 months, participating in year-long missions designed to gather more data on extended duration spaceflight. These missions are harder. The body deteriorates more. Bone loss accumulates. Muscle weakness increases. Psychological challenges intensify. A year is a long time to be confined with the same small group in a closed environment, to sleep in the same tiny space every night, to see the same faces, eat the same foods, follow the same routines. Those who complete year-long missions report a sense of accomplishment, but also relief when it ends. The knowledge gained is invaluable. It demonstrates that humans can survive a year in space, which means a Mars mission is physiologically possible, at least barely. Crew size is usually 6 or 7 people, though it's varied from 3 to as many as 13 when multiple vehicles were docked and crews were overlapping. 6 or 7 is optimal for the station's current configuration. Enough people to share the work. Maintenance, experiments, exercise, housekeeping all require time. Enough diversity of skills, engineers, scientists, physicians, pilots, all bringing different expertise. Not so many that living space becomes cramped or that supplies run short. The crew forms a small community, interdependent, isolated together. They share meals when schedules allow, celebrate birthdays and holidays, support each other through difficulties. The dynamic matters enormously. Personality conflicts can make life miserable in confinement. Compatible crews work smoothly, efficiently, even happily despite the challenges. International teams live together, creating a unique multicultural environment. Americans, Russians, Europeans, Japanese, Canadians, all sharing the same space. They eat together, comparing national dishes, sharing favourite foods from home, joking about differences in cuisine. They work together, American, crew members assisting with Russian equipment, Russians helping with American experiments. They learn each other's languages, picking up phrases, practicing during downtime. They celebrate each other's holidays. New Year's twice, once on January 1st, and again on the Russian Orthodox date. Independence Day for Americans. Cosmonautics Day for Russians. Cultural exchange happens naturally, unavoidably in such close quarters. Stereotypes break down. Differences matter less than similarities. Everyone misses home. Everyone finds the food monotonous. Everyone struggles with sleep. Everyone marvels at the view. Emergencies are always planned for because in space, there's no calling for help. No rescue helicopters, no nearby hospitals, no option to simply evacuate and wait for assistance. If something goes wrong, fire, toxic leak, depressurization, medical crisis, the crew must handle it themselves. They train extensively for emergencies, fire drills, depressurization procedures, medical scenarios where they must treat injured crew members with limited equipment. Escape vehicles remain docked at all times, Soyuz and Dragon capsules that could carry the entire crew to Earth if necessary. These vehicles serve as lifeboats. If the station becomes uninhabitable, everyone can retreat to the capsules separate and return to Earth. This has never happened, but the capability exists. The procedures are rehearsed. Everyone knows their role, their escape route, which capsule they'd board. Return to Earth is intense, transforming gradually from the gentle weightlessness of orbit to the crushing force of re-entry. The departure from the station is bittersweet, saying goodbye to crew members who are staying, to the place that's been home for months. The capsule separates, backs away. The station recedes, growing smaller until it's just a bright object against the blackness. Then the capsule orients heat shield forward, engines fire, slowing orbital velocity. The trajectory begins to curve downward. Re-entry begins subtly, a faint glow outside the windows as the capsule encounters thicker atmosphere. Then suddenly, the glow becomes brilliant plasma, pink and orange, streaming past the windows. Temperature outside reaches thousands of degrees. The heat shield ablates, material vaporizing to carry heat away. Inside, crew members are pressed into their seats as deceleration builds. 2 G-forces, 3, 4. After 6 months of weightlessness, even 1 G feels crushing. At 4 or 5, breathing becomes difficult. The body heavy, arms impossible to lift. The capsule shakes violently, buffeted by atmospheric forces. Communication is impossible. The plasma sheath blocks radio signals. For several minutes, the crew is cut off, alone, enduring the violence of re-entry. Then the plasma dissipates. The capsule slows. Parachutes deploy with a jolt. The violent shaking gives way to gentle swaying. The ground approaches. Impact. The capsule rocks. Settles. Hatches open. Fresh air floods in. Wind, moisture, smells of earth. Gravity pulls with unrelenting force. Crew members who floated effortlessly for months cannot stand without assistance. Their legs shake. Their balance fails. They're lifted from the capsule, placed in chairs, wrapped in blankets. Their home, changed by their time in space in ways both measurable and profound. Chapter 9. The Future of the ISS. The ISS will not last forever. Nothing built by humans lasts forever. Structures age, materials weaken. Systems designed for a 15-year lifespan have already exceeded their design life by years. The station functions, but it requires constant maintenance. More things break now than in earlier years. Repairs become more difficult as spare parts deplete and original components become harder to replace. Eventually, perhaps in the late 2020s, possibly into the 2030s, the station will reach a point where continued operation is no longer safe or practical. The aging structure is monitored carefully by engineers on the ground and crew members aboard. Cracks in pressure hulls are inspected regularly. Metal fatigue is a concern. The station experiences thermal cycles every 90 minutes as it moves from sunlight to shadow and back. This constant expansion and contraction stresses materials. Seals degrade over time. Coolant loops develop leaks. Electronics fail. Some failures are minor, easily repaired. Others are serious. In recent years, air leaks in the Russian segment have required ongoing attention, not major, but persistent, requiring periodic patching and monitoring. These problems will only increase as the station ages. A planned controlled deorbit is expected when the station's operational life ends. This won't be abandonment. The ISS will not be left to decay naturally until atmospheric drag pulls it down in an uncontrolled re-entry that could drop debris anywhere along its orbital path. Instead, when the decision is made to end the mission, cargo ships will dock, engines will fire, lowering the orbit in a controlled manner. The station will be guided down, aimed at a remote stretch of ocean far from shipping lanes and land masses. Likely the South Pacific, where previous space stations have been deorbited. The final moments will be spectacular and terrible. The massive structure entering atmosphere, heating, beginning to break apart, modules separating, solar panels tearing away, metal glowing white hot. The ISS, home to hundreds of astronauts over 2 decades, will disintegrate in minutes. Some fragments will vaporize completely, others will survive to impact the ocean. Within hours, the station that took 13 years to build will be gone, reduced to scattered debris sinking into deep water. Knowledge will guide future stations. Everything learned aboard the ISS, every success, every failure, every unexpected problem and creative solution will inform what comes next. Engineers now understand how to build in space more effectively, which materials resist degradation, which systems are most reliable, which designs work well and which create problems. Future stations will be better because the ISS taught lessons that couldn't have been learned any other way. Private companies are already designing commercial space stations, smaller facilities for research and manufacturing. NASA is planning Gateway, a lunar orbiting station that will support missions to the moon's surface. China is building its own station. The ISS will not be replaced by a single successor, but by multiple facilities, each serving different purposes. The ISS proved humans can live together in space peacefully, despite differences in nationality, language, and culture. This may be its most important legacy, not the science, though the science matters greatly, not the technology, though the technological achievements are remarkable. The legacy is cooperation, the proof that people from different nations with different political systems and different histories, including histories of conflict, can share a home beyond Earth, can work together toward common goals, can trust one another with their lives. The ISS stands as an existence proof that international cooperation in space is not just possible but successful, even when relations on Earth are strained. This example matters. Future space exploration will require even greater cooperation. Missions to Mars will be too expensive, too complex for any single nation to accomplish alone. Lunar bases will need international participation. The precedent set by the ISS, that space can be a realm of cooperation rather than competition, may ultimately be more valuable than any scientific discovery made aboard. Outro. A light moving silently. And so we return to where we began. To that light moving across the night sky, silent, steady, carrying people who float in metal rooms, looking down at the planet they left behind. If you go outside tonight at the right time, you might see it. A bright dot moving faster than an airplane, steady and bright, taking perhaps 3 or 4 minutes to cross from horizon to horizon. No sound will reach you, no engine roar, no mechanical hum, just light, constant and quiet, a human-made star travelling overhead. Earth glows beneath them right now. Blue and white swirled together, green and brown continents, clouds casting shadows on oceans, rivers gleaming like silver threads, cities sparkling in the darkness, marking human presence with geometric patterns of light, mountains casting long shadows, deserts glowing pale tan, forests deep green. The planet breathes beneath them, storms forming, winds driving waves, seasons shifting. And inside the station, astronauts drift quietly through their routines, following the schedule that structures their days, checking instruments that monitor systems, recording data from experiments, eating meals from pouches, trying to vary the monotony, exercising on machines that go nowhere but keep them strong enough to return home, sleeping in bags attached to walls, floating in private darkness while the station hums around them. They are together, not because they chose each other personally, but because they chose this life, the work, the isolation, the strange, weightless existence above the world. They are Americans and Russians and Europeans and Japanese and Canadians. They speak different languages, though they've learned each other's well enough to work together. They grew up under different skies, with different histories, different cultures. But here, in this aluminum cylinder hurtling through vacuum, they share everything. Air that's been breathed and rebreathed, cleaned and recycled. Water that's been drunk and excreted and purified and drunk again. Food from packages marked in different languages. Space that's measured in cubic meters and never feels quite adequate. Risk that is shared equally among them all. And when they look out the windows, and they do look often, unable to resist the view despite seeing it hundreds of times, they see no borders. Political boundaries don't exist from orbit. No walls separating nations, no lines dividing territories. Just Earth, whole, continuous, a single interconnected system. The atmosphere they see from above doesn't stop at frontiers. Ocean currents flow without regard to maritime boundaries. Weather systems cross continents indifferently. The planet functions as one entity, and from 400 kilometers up, its unity is obvious in a way that's impossible to see from the ground. The ISS passes overhead once more as we imagine it, a bright dot against the stars, moving steadily, silently. You might see it tonight if you know when to look, if the sky is clear, if the station happens to pass over your part of the world during the brief window when it's illuminated by the sun while the ground beneath is dark. And when you do see it, if you do, you can think of them. The people inside, 6 or 7 individuals from different nations floating, working, living together in the most unlikely place. A monument to what we can accomplish when we set aside our differences, when we reach for something higher, something better, something that transcends the boundaries and conflicts that define so much of life on Earth. Rest now. Let the image of that light linger in your mind. The station moves on, circling endlessly, completing another orbit and another and another. 16 times today, 16 times tomorrow. Every 90 minutes, reliably, predictably, a human presence passing overhead. And somewhere inside that moving light, someone is looking down right now. Looking at Earth, thinking of home, missing the smell of rain, the feel of wind, the simple act of walking, but also marveling at the privilege of seeing the planet whole, of living for a time beyond the boundary of atmosphere and gravity, of being one of the few 100 humans who have ever called space home, however temporarily. The station will not last forever. Someday, perhaps in a decade or two, it will make its final orbit, will begin its controlled descent, will burn in atmosphere and vanish. But while it exists, it stands as proof of something important, that humans can live in space, that we can cooperate across boundaries, that we can build places of peace even in the most challenging environments, that we can look back at Earth and see it not as a collection of separate nations, but as a single, precious world. Good night, sleep well. And if you dream tonight of floating, weightless and free, surrounded by stars, remember that somewhere above, that dream is someone's reality. They're up there now, looking down, living the strange, beautiful, isolated existence of life aboard the International Space Station. Tomorrow they'll wake and do it all again, and the next day, and the next. Until their mission ends and they return home, changed by their time above the world in ways both subtle and profound. The light moves on, silent, steady, carrying its crew forward through the darkness. And we, down here on Earth, can look up and know humans live there, together, peacefully, above the world but still connected to it. A small miracle, a quiet testament, a light in the darkness that we built together. Before we begin tonight's journey, if you're enjoying this content, using hype points on this video helps the channel more than you possibly know. It truly makes a difference in reaching more listeners like yourself. If you're listening on Spotify, leaving a review helps us out so much. And if you'd like, comment what time it is for you and where in the world you're listening from. We absolutely love seeing where everyone is tuning in from across the globe. Finally, if you enjoy this content, subscribing keeps you connected to more stories like this one. Now let's begin. The desert wind moves differently at night. Across the Giza Plateau, where sand meets stone and silence becomes almost tangible, 3 monuments rise against the darkness. They've stood here for longer than most civilizations have existed. They've watched empires emerge and collapse. They've outlasted languages, religions, entire ways of understanding the world. Tonight we're going to walk slowly through the story of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Not the rush tour guide version, not the sensational documentary promising impossible secrets. Just a calm, methodical exploration of what we actually know about the last surviving wonder of the ancient world. Picture yourself standing on the plateau as the sun sets, the heat of the day finally releasing its grip on the sand. The Great Pyramid looms before you, massive beyond easy comprehension, its surface rough and weathered by millennia. This is where we begin our journey through time, through human ambition, through the intersection of faith and engineering that created something genuinely eternal. The temperature drops as darkness approaches. In the desert, the transition from day to night happens quickly, dramatically. One moment the stones are radiating accumulated heat, the next they're cool to the touch. The sky transforms from pale blue to deep indigo, and stars begin to emerge, the same stars that guided the builders who created this monument. We're going to explore every dimension of this structure. Each detail reveals something about the people who built this, the civilization that demanded it, and the mystery that still surrounds it. We'll walk through its history, its construction, its purpose, and its legacy. We'll descend into its hidden chambers and climb through its narrow passages. We'll examine what we know and acknowledge what remains unknown. Let's start at the beginning, in a world so different from ours that it requires imagination just to glimpse it. A world where the Nile flooded predictably each year, where the pharaoh was literally divine, where death wasn't an ending but a transformation into something greater. Chapter 1. The world before the pyramid context itself is where we must begin. The Great Pyramid was built during Egypt's 4th dynasty, a period known as the Old Kingdom, when Egyptian civilization had already been thriving for centuries, This wasn't the dawn of their culture. This was their golden age, their moment of supreme confidence and capability. The Nile Valley during this period was unlike anywhere else on Earth. Annual floods deposited rich silt across the farmland, creating abundance that freed people to pursue specialization. Farmers, yes, but also scribes, priests, craftsmen, administrators, engineers. A complex society with sophisticated bureaucracy, advanced mathematics, and deep religious traditions. The pyramids at Giza were not the first pyramids Egypt had built. By the time Khufu commissioned his great monument, Egyptian engineers had been refining pyramid construction for generations. They had learned from earlier attempts, both successful and failed. The bent pyramid at Dashur shows where angles were adjusted mid-construction. The pyramid at Meidum reveals what happens when outer casing stones aren't properly supported. Each previous structure taught lessons that informed what would be built at Giza. The name we need to remember is Khufu. In Greek histories he's called Cheops, but to his people he was Khufu, the second pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. He ruled sometime around 2600 years before the Common Era, though exact dates remain debated by scholars who work with fragmentary records and astronomical calculations. What isn't debated is his ambition, his vision, his determination to create something unprecedented. Khufu inherited a stable kingdom from his father Sneferu, who had himself built multiple pyramids. The dynasty was at its peak, with resources flowing into the royal treasury, a well-organized administrative system, and the accumulated knowledge of previous generations of builders. Khufu had the means, the expertise, and the divine mandate to attempt something extraordinary. But to understand why the pyramid exists, you must understand how ancient Egyptians viewed their kings. This wasn't a matter of politics or governance as we understand those concepts. Pharaohs weren't simply political leaders who happened to enjoy luxurious lifestyles and commanded armies. They were living gods, divine intermediaries between the mortal realm and the eternal one. When a pharaoh spoke, it was the voice of divinity made manifest in human form. The pharaoh maintained Mayat, the cosmic order that kept chaos at bay. Without the pharaoh, the Nile might not flood, the sun might not rise, the stars might cease their orderly procession across the sky. This wasn't metaphor to the ancient Egyptians. This was understood as literal truth, as fundamental to the functioning of reality as gravity is to our understanding of the universe. When a pharaoh died, he didn't simply cease to exist, didn't merely become a memory or a corpse. He transformed, became one with the gods, particularly with Ra, the sun god who travelled across the sky each day in his solar bark, bringing light and life to the world. The pharaoh's death was his apotheosis, his assumption into the divine realm where he would continue to serve as a bridge between worlds. This belief explains something that otherwise seems inexplicable. If a pharaoh was divine, his tomb wasn't just a burial place, wasn't simply a container for a body. It was a transformation chamber, a cosmic launch pad, a permanent dwelling for a god. This explains why Egyptian royalty poured resources into tombs that dwarfed their palaces. The palace was temporary, a place for the brief mortal phase of a divine existence. The tomb was forever, or at least as close to forever as human effort could achieve. Look beyond just Khufu's pyramid for a moment. The entire Giza plateau became a sacred landscape over the course of several generations. Eventually it would hold 3 major pyramids, multiple smaller pyramids for queens, temples both mortuary and valley, causeways connecting these elements, and an entire infrastructure dedicated to the afterlife. This was a city for the dead, but also a factory for eternity, a place where the living laboured to ensure the divine order continued beyond death. Mortuary temples at the pyramid's bases served as interfaces between the living and the dead. Priests performed daily rituals, offerings of food and incense, recitations of sacred texts. These weren't symbolic gestures. The Egyptians believed the pharaoh's spirit needed these offerings, that the rituals sustained the transformed god-king in his eternal existence. The pyramid shape itself wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't chosen simply because it was stable or impressive. The form represented the primordial mound that emerged from the waters of chaos at creation, according to Egyptian mythology. In the beginning, there was only none, the primordial ocean, formless and dark. From these waters rose the first land, the first solid thing in existence, and from this mound the creator god Atum brought forth all of creation. Every pyramid echoed this cosmic moment of creation. But pyramids also represented something else, something visible in the sky. They were stone representations of the sun's rays breaking through clouds, creating a stairway between earth and heaven. Stand in the desert when storm clouds gather and you'll see them, those dramatic rays of light piercing through, creating visible paths from sky to ground. The pyramid made these rays permanent, made them solid, made them a reliable path for the pharaoh's soul to ascend. Every angle had meaning. Every orientation served purpose. Nothing about the pyramid's design was random or merely aesthetic. The slope of the sides, the alignment of the corners, the positioning on the plateau, all of these emerged from careful planning that integrated mathematical precision with spiritual significance. The pyramid required years of preparation before a single stone was quarried. Site selection came first. Why this particular spot on the plateau? Visibility certainly, bedrock quality absolutely, but also astronomical considerations, ritual appropriateness, symbolic meaning. The ancient Egyptians approached this project with the same methodical precision that modern engineers would recognize, just with different tools and different motivations. Astronomical observations determined orientation. Priests and astronomers spent nights watching the stars, marking their positions, calculating alignments. Landscape surveys mapped the terrain and calculated volumes. Scribes recorded measurements, tracked resources, projected timelines. Resource calculations determined how much stone would be needed, how many workers, how much food to feed them, how many tools would wear out and need replacement. Labour organisation required creating entirely new administrative structures. Overseer positions needed to be created and filled. Supply chains had to be established. Living quarters for workers had to be built. Bakeries and breweries had to be constructed to feed the workforce. The pyramids shaped Egypt before construction even began. While we can't pinpoint the exact year construction began, we know it was during Khufu's reign, which lasted approximately 23 years according to ancient king lists. Some estimates suggest the pyramid took 20 to 30 years to complete, which means planning likely began before Khufu even took the throne, during his father's reign, when succession was being prepared and the young prince was learning what would be expected of him. This wasn't just about creating something big, it wasn't about vanity or showing off. It was about creating something perfect, something that would speak to eternity about Egyptian capability, about divine order, about the triumph of Ma'at over chaos. Ma'at was the Egyptian concept of cosmic order and balance, truth and justice, the fundamental rightness of things. The pyramid embodied Ma'at in stone, imposed order onto the landscape, created permanence in a world of change. By the time the first stone was laid, this project had already changed Egypt. It had required reorganization of labour patterns, development of new techniques, creation of infrastructure for transport and logistics. The pyramid shaped the civilization even before it shaped the skyline, demanded innovations that would outlast the construction itself. Chapter 2: A Mountain Built by Humans. When you first see it in person, the scale hits you physically. The Great Pyramid originally stood 481 feet tall. To put that gently in perspective, it remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth for over 3,800 years. Think about that. 38 centuries of human progress, and nothing surpassed it until medieval European cathedrals finally exceeded its height. Try to imagine that span of time. The pyramid was already ancient when the Parthenon was built in Athens. It was already a tourist attraction when Rome was founding its empire. It had stood for over 2,000 years before the first words of the New Testament were written. And through all that time, through the rise and fall of countless civilizations, it remained the tallest thing humans had ever built. Today, the pyramid stands at 455 feet. The difference represents the loss of the pyramidion, the capstone that once crowned the structure, along with settling and erosion over millennia. Even diminished, it dominates the landscape. Modern Cairo has grown around it, buildings creeping closer to the plateau's edge, but the pyramid still commands attention. You can see it from miles away, rising above the urban sprawl. To truly grasp the scale, you need to walk around it. Each side of the base measures approximately 756 feet. The pyramid covers just over 13 acres of desert. To visualize this, imagine walking the perimeter. At a casual pace, it would take you nearly 15 minutes to circle the structure once. 15 minutes of walking past uninterrupted stone and you're back where you started. Stand at one corner and try to see the opposite corner. You can't. The distance is too great, the perspective too vast. The pyramid doesn't just occupy space, it defines it, creates its own gravitational center on the landscape. Those 4 base sides aren't just roughly equal, they're equal to within inches across lengths of more than 700 feet. The base is almost perfectly level, with variations measured in fractions of an inch. This level of accuracy, achieved without modern instruments, without laser levels or GPS, without even the magnetic compass, remains genuinely remarkable. The surveyors who laid out the pyramid's foundation worked with water levels, measuring rods, and astronomical observations. They created a platform so level that modern instruments struggle to detect variations. On a structure covering 13 acres, this precision borders on the inexplicable. The pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, with a total mass estimated at around 5.9 million tons. To compare, that's roughly the weight of 16 Empire State Buildings. It's a mountain of stone, assembled block by block, each piece cut, transported and positioned with care. Think about that number, 2.3 million blocks. If you spent 1 second looking at each block, it would take you over 26 days of continuous observation to see them all. And the ancient Egyptians didn't just look at them, they quarried them, shaped them, moved them and placed them. The average block weighs about 2.5 tons, roughly the weight of a large SUV, but this average conceals variation. Some blocks weigh less than a ton, others weigh significantly more. The pyramid isn't uniform. Its interior contains chambers, passages, and structural features that require different stone sizes. The largest granite blocks, used in the king's chamber and the relieving chambers above it, weigh between 25 and 80 tons each. These massive pieces of stone weren't placed at ground level where you could simply roll or slide them into position. They were lifted and positioned high within the structure's interior, fitted with extraordinary precision. Imagine moving an 80-ton granite block. That's heavier than most modern trucks. Now imagine lifting it 100 feet into the air and positioning it exactly where it needs to be, aligning it perfectly with adjacent blocks. The ancient Egyptians did this repeatedly, without cranes, without hydraulics, without any of the machinery we consider essential for such work. The blocks fit together with joints so tight that you often can't slip a piece of paper between them. This wasn't achieved with mortar filling gaps. The stones themselves were cut and placed with extraordinary precision. Run your hand along a joint between blocks and you'll feel how seamlessly they meet. The precision is tactile, physical, undeniable. From its completion around 2560 BCE until Lincoln Cathedral's central tower was completed in 1311 CE, no structure exceeded the Great Pyramid's height. That's 3,871 years of supremacy. No other building in history has held that record for anywhere close to that length of time. The pyramid defined the limits of human architectural ambition for millennia. The pyramid's internal volume has been calculated at around 2.6 million cubic meters. It's mostly solid stone, with relatively small interior spaces comprising the passages and chambers. The ratio of solid mass to empty space is extraordinary. This isn't a hollow shell, it's a mountain, with narrow corridors carved through it. The pyramid's faces rise at an angle of 51 degrees, 51 minutes. This specific angle wasn't chosen randomly. It relates to both aesthetic proportions and structural stability, creating a profile that has successfully supported the massive weight above for over 4,000 years. Steeper, and the structure might be unstable. Shallower, and it would cover an impossibly large footprint. This angle represents the optimal solution to multiple engineering challenges. Each face of the pyramid covers about 5.5 acres of sloping stone. Originally, with the polished casing stones in place, these faces would have presented smooth, nearly seamless surfaces reflecting sunlight like mirrors. Imagine 5.5 acres of polished white limestone tilted at 51 degrees catching the Egyptian sun. The visual effect would have been overwhelming. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height approximates 2 times pi, a mathematical constant. Whether this was intentional or coincidental remains debated, but it demonstrates the sophisticated geometric understanding of the builders. Even if they didn't conceptualize pi as we do, they clearly understood the relationships between angles, heights, and perimeters. The pyramid has survived major earthquakes that destroyed other structures in the region. Its form, with a broad base and tapering sides, distributes weight efficiently and provides inherent seismic resistance. When the ground shakes, the pyramid flexes slightly, absorbing and dissipating energy. Its mass provides stability, its shape provides strength. All this mass, all this precision, all this scale required not just vision but practical solutions to impossible-seeming problems. How do you actually build such a thing? How do you organize the work? How do you move the stones? How do you ensure accuracy? These questions lead us to the next chapter, to the practical realities of construction. Chapter 3. How stone became structure. The bulk of the pyramid's limestone came from quarries located right on the Giza plateau itself. The ancient Egyptians didn't transport millions of tons of stone from distant locations. They cut it from the bedrock beneath and around the construction site. You can still see the quarry marks. In the plateau's surface, evidence of where stone was systematically removed. These quarries became part of the construction site's landscape. As workers cut blocks from the ground, they created depressions, channels, ramps. The plateau was reshaped by the act of building, transformed from natural bedrock into a worked landscape of human intention. While local limestone formed the pyramid's core and most of its mass, 2 special types of stone came from elsewhere. White Tura limestone used for the exterior casing was quarried across the Nile River and transported by barge during the annual flood when the river was high. Red Aswan granite, used for the king's chamber and internal structural elements, came from quarries over 500 miles to the south, a journey that would have taken weeks. The transport of Aswan granite represents a logistical achievement almost as impressive as the pyramid itself. These massive blocks had to be cut from living rock in Upper Egypt, loaded onto barges capable of supporting enormous weight, floated hundreds of miles down the Nile, offloaded at Giza, and then moved from the river to the plateau and up into position within the pyramid's interior. For the local limestone, workers cut blocks free from the bedrock, then moved them using wooden sledges pulled by teams of men. Recent experiments have demonstrated that wetting the sand in front of the sledges reduced friction dramatically, making it possible to move massive stones with human power alone. Water transformed sand from an impediment into a lubricant. This technique appears simple, but represents sophisticated understanding of physics. The workers knew that dry sand would create friction, causing the sledge to dig in and resist movement. Wet sand, however, compacts and smooths, allowing the sledge to glide. Ancient tomb paintings show workers pouring water in front of sledges, depicting this technique in action. The pyramid wasn't built by slaves. Evidence from worker villages, graffiti left by construction crews, and analysis of burial sites indicates the labourers were paid workers, organised into rotating shifts. Many were farmers who worked on the pyramid during flood season, when agricultural work was impossible. They came to Giza, laboured for a period, and then returned to their farms. This wasn't forced labour. This was organised public works, a civic duty that also provided wages and purpose during the agricultural off-season. Calculations based on the number of stones, the time available, and the physical limitations of the work suggest a permanent workforce of around 20,000 to 30,000 people, with possible peak periods employing more. This workforce would have included not just stone movers but also quarrymen, tool makers, rope manufacturers, carpenters, supervisors, scribes, bakers, brewers, and countless other specializations. The pyramid required an entire support economy. Crews had names, left graffiti, proclaiming their achievements, and appear to have engaged in friendly competition. One crew called themselves Friends of Khufu. Another was Drunkards of Menkaure. These weren't anonymous slaves toiling in misery. They were organised teams with identity and pride, workers who saw themselves as part of something greater than themselves. The graffiti they left inside the pyramid, marks invisible to anyone not exploring the structure's interior spaces, reveals their pride. They marked which crew had placed which blocks, recorded their names, left evidence of their existence. These marks weren't for public display, they were for themselves, for their gods, for eternity. Archaeological excavations have uncovered worker villages near the pyramid site, complete with bakeries, breweries, workshops and sleeping quarters. These workers ate well, primarily bread, beer and meat, suggesting they were valued, not exploited. The bakeries could produce enough bread to feed thousands. The breweries produced beer, which was a staple beverage safer to drink than water. Evidence suggests workers received medical care, with healed fractures showing treatment and recovery periods. The primary stone-cutting tools were copper chisels and saws, along with stone hammers. Copper is soft compared to modern steel, requiring frequent sharpening and replacement, but it was sufficient for cutting limestone when combined with abrasive sand. Workers would saw into limestone using copper blades, pouring sand and water into the cut to create an abrasive slurry that did the actual cutting. For harder stones like granite, different techniques were necessary. Workers used dolerite hammerstones, extraordinarily hard igneous rock, to pound and shape granite blocks. This was slow, painstaking work, but effective. The precision achieved in granite cutting, particularly in the King's Chamber, demonstrates mastery of the material. To achieve the tight joints between blocks, workers likely used a method of repeatedly placing stones, marking high points with red ochre, removing the stone, grinding down the marked areas, and repeating until the fit was perfect. This trial and error approach requires patience, but produces remarkable results. Analysis shows that thin layers of gypsum mortar were used between some stones, but not to hold them together. The mortar served more as a lubricant during positioning, and may have helped with fine adjustments. The weight of the stones above provides the real structural bond. Once in place, the blocks don't need mortar. Gravity and precision do the work. How the Egyptians lifted stones to increasing heights remains partially uncertain, but most theories involve some form of ramping system. Straight ramps extending from ground level to the pyramid's top would require enormous amounts of material and would need to be lengthened as the pyramid rose. Spiral ramps wrapping around the pyramid's exterior could work but would complicate corner construction. Internal ramps built into the pyramid structure remain possible but unproven. Evidence exists for all these approaches, suggesting the Egyptians may have used different methods at different stages of construction. Pragmatism likely trumped dogmatic adherence to a single technique. If one approach worked better for a particular challenge, they used it. Despite everything we know, significant questions remain about specific construction techniques. The absence of detailed construction records from the period means we're often working backward from the finished product, deducing methods from results. This isn't failure of archaeology. This is the nature of studying a civilization that didn't document their building techniques because they were common knowledge at the time. The pyramid's construction required not just labour, but logistics, coordination, resource management and planning that would challenge modern project managers. Feeding 30,000 workers daily meant producing thousands of loaves of bread and gallons of beer every day. Maintaining tool supplies required a steady production of copper implements. Coordinating stone delivery from multiple quarries demanded scheduling and communication systems. If the pyramid took 20 years to complete and contains 2.3 million blocks, workers would have needed to place approximately 315 blocks per day, every day, for 2 decades. This seems impossible until you remember this wasn't sequential. Multiple teams worked simultaneously on different sections. Different quarries provided stone concurrently. The project progressed on many fronts at once. All this effort, All this organisation, all this daily labour over decades, served not just to create mass, but to create alignment, to achieve something beyond mere construction. The pyramid wasn't just big, it was oriented, aligned, positioned according to principles that connected earth to sky. Chapter 4: Order in the Stars. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of about 4 arc minutes, or 1/15th of a single degree. This precision exceeded the capabilities of compasses, which the ancient Egyptians didn't possess. They achieved this alignment through careful observation of the stars, a technique that required patience, mathematical understanding, and sophisticated astronomical knowledge. The most likely method involved observing circumpolar stars, stars that never set below the horizon as they wheel around the celestial pole. By tracking a star's rising and setting points on an artificial horizon and bisecting the angle between them, ancient astronomers could determine true north with extraordinary accuracy. This required building observation platforms, marking positions, performing calculations, and checking results multiple times. Some researchers have proposed that the 3 pyramids of Giza align with the 3 stars of Orion's belt, a constellation, the Egyptians associated with Osiris, god of the afterlife. While this correlation has been debated and remains controversial in academic circles, the Egyptians definitely viewed the sky as a map of the divine realm. Stars weren't just points of light. They were gods, destinations, the architecture of heaven. The 4 faces of the pyramid align precisely with the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. This ensured the structure harmonized with the sun's daily journey across the sky, reinforcing the connection between the pharaoh and the sun god Ra. Each face caught the sun at different times, creating a daily cycle of light and shadow that echoed the sun god's journey. 2 narrow shafts extend from the king's chamber, one pointing north, one south. Similar shafts exist in the queen's chamber, though these don't extend all the way through the pyramid's masonry. These weren't ventilation shafts in any practical sense. Air circulation wasn't necessary in a tomb. They appear to have had astronomical or spiritual significance, possibly representing pathways for the pharaoh's soul to ascend to specific stars. The southern shaft from the king's chamber, when the pyramid was built, pointed directly at Al-Nitak, the brightest star in Orion's belt during its culmination at the meridian. Whether this was intentional remains debated, but the precision of the alignment is undeniable. The shaft isn't just vaguely pointing south. It's aimed at a specific celestial target. The northern shaft from the king's chamber, at the time of construction, aligned with Thuban, then the pole star in the constellation Draco. This alignment would change over time due to Earth's axial precession, the slow wobble of our planet's rotation that causes the position of the pole star to shift over thousands of years. This makes the shaft a timestamp, evidence of exactly when the pyramid was built. The Egyptian concept of Ma'at, cosmic order and balance, pervades every aspect of the pyramid's design. The precise alignments weren't just technical achievements, weren't simply the result of engineers showing off their skills. They represented the imposition of divine order onto the physical world, ensuring the structure harmonized with eternal cosmic patterns. The pyramid was meant to function not just as a building, but as a cosmological instrument, a physical embodiment of the relationship between earth and heaven. While we can measure these alignments precisely today using modern instruments, we can't always know their exact significance to the ancient builders. We're looking at their choices through our modern understanding of astronomy, which may not fully capture their spiritual and cosmological framework. They saw meaning in the stars that goes beyond our cataloguing of positions and magnitudes. We've examined the pyramid from outside, traced its connections to earth and sky, explored its relationship to cosmic order. Now it's time to enter to explore the hidden chambers carved into millions of tons of stone, to walk passages that have existed in darkness for millennia. Chapter 5: Inside the Pyramid. The original entrance is located on the north face, about 55 feet above ground level. This wasn't the entrance tourists use today. That was created by workers digging for treasure in the 9th century. breaking through the masonry in an attempt to reach whatever riches they imagined lay within. The hole they created bypasses the pyramid's original entrance system, providing direct access to the interior. From the original entrance, a narrow corridor slopes downward at an angle of 26 degrees, cutting first through the pyramid's masonry, then through the bedrock beneath. This passage is only about 3.5 feet tall, forcing anyone traversing it to stoop or crawl. The walls are smooth, the angle constant, the construction precise even in this hidden space where no one was meant to see. The descending passage eventually opens into a rough-cut chamber carved from bedrock, located about 90 feet below the pyramid's base. This chamber appears unfinished, with an irregular floor and a shaft descending even deeper into the bedrock, extending down into darkness. Its purpose remains unclear. Was it abandoned when plans changed? Was it always meant to be unfinished, representing the underworld's chaos in contrast to the finished chambers above? We don't know. About 60 feet from the entrance, a different passage branches upward from the descending corridor, also at an angle of 26 degrees, but climbing into the pyramid's interior rather than descending beneath it. For centuries, this passage was concealed by a fitted stone plug, hiding the pyramid's true interior from anyone who entered through the north face. The passage was invisible, a secret route to chambers above. The ascending passage is narrow and low, barely allowing passage, maintaining the same uncomfortable dimensions as the descending corridor. You can't walk upright, you can't move quickly. Every foot of progress requires effort and attention. But this passage climbs toward the pyramid's heart, rising through solid masonry toward something extraordinary. The ascending passage opens into the Grand Gallery, one of the ancient world's most remarkable architectural achievements. This corbelled passage soars 28 feet high, while maintaining the same upward angle as the ascending passage. The walls step inward as they rise, creating a narrow ceiling despite the impressive height. The effect is cathedral-like, unexpected in a space that spends most of its existence in complete darkness. The Grand Gallery's function remains debated. Some theories suggest it housed sliding granite blocks that would seal the ascending passage after the pharaoh's burial. Others propose it served a ceremonial function during the pyramid's construction and consecration. The space feels too grand, too carefully constructed to serve a purely utilitarian purpose, yet its exact role in the pyramid's design eludes certain explanation. At the top of the Grand Gallery, through a narrow antechamber with granite portcullis blocks that could have sealed the chamber beyond, lies the king's chamber. This room measures about 34 feet long, 17 feet wide and 19 feet tall. Every surface is lined with red Aswan granite, brought from quarries over 500 miles to the south. The stone's polished surface catches light, reflects sound, creates an environment unlike anywhere else in the pyramid. In the king's chamber sits a rectangular granite box, slightly larger than a human body, with one corner broken. This is assumed to be Khufu's sarcophagus, though no body or burial goods have ever been found within the pyramid. The lid is missing. The interior is empty. Whether it was robbed in antiquity or never used remains unknown. Some argue the pyramid was looted before historical records began. Others suggest it never functioned as a tomb at all, that its purpose was symbolic or ceremonial rather than practical. Unlike the treasure-filled tomb of Tutankhamun discovered by Howard Carter in the Valley of the Kings, the Great Pyramid has yielded no mummy, no grave goods, no definitive proof it ever served as an actual burial site. This absence has fueled centuries of speculation about the pyramid's true purpose, spawning theories ranging from astronomical observatory to power plant to grain storage. The simplest explanation remains that it was robbed thoroughly in antiquity, but the complete absence of evidence makes certainty impossible. Returning to the ascending passage, taking a different route this time, we find a horizontal passage branching off about halfway up. This leads to what's known as the Queen's Chamber, though no evidence suggests it was intended for a queen. The name is a modern convention based on mistaken assumptions about Egyptian burial practices. The Queen's Chamber sits almost exactly on the pyramid's east-west centerline. It measures about 17 feet square and 20 feet tall, with a pointed corbelled ceiling similar in construction to the Grand Gallery, though much smaller in scale. A niche is cut into the eastern wall, its purpose unknown. Was it meant to hold a statue, an offering? Did it serve some function we can't reconstruct from the empty cavity that remains? The floor of the Queen's chamber remains rough and unlevelled, suggesting the chamber may have been abandoned before completion. Whether this represents a change in plans, an intentional choice to leave it unfinished, or simply work interrupted by Khufu's death and burial, we cannot say with certainty. Above the King's Chamber, explorers in the early 19th century discovered 5 additional chambers stacked vertically. These weren't designed for access. There are no entrances from the normal passage system. They were discovered by breaking through from the Grand Gallery, creating holes in the masonry to see what lay beyond. These chambers serve as stress-relieving structures, distributing the immense weight of the pyramid above so it doesn't crush the King's Chamber below. The relieving chambers are constructed of massive granite beams laid horizontally, creating open spaces between them. The topmost chamber has a pointed limestone roof, designed to deflect weight outward to the pyramid's sides. Together, these chambers have protected the King's Chamber from collapse for over 4,000 years. Without them, the weight would have crushed the chamber below, reducing it to rubble. The King's Chamber has unusual acoustic properties. Sound resonates within the granite walls in specific ways, creating harmonics and echoes that transform simple sounds into something more complex. Whether this was intentional or coincidental remains debated. Some researchers have experimented with chanting and musical instruments in the chamber, noting unusual resonances. Did ancient Egyptians use this space for ritual purposes involving sound? We can only speculate. We've explored the interior, walked the passages, stood in the chambers, but we've only seen the pyramid as it exists today, stripped of its original covering, weathered by millennia. To understand how it once appeared, we must reconstruct what was lost. Chapter 6. The Lost Skin of Light. Originally, the entire structure was covered in polished white Tura limestone casing stones. These weren't rough blocks like those visible today, weren't the weathered stepped surfaces that tourists photograph. They were precisely cut, polished to a near mirror finish, and fitted together with joints measured in fractions of an inch. The pyramid wasn't rough, it was smooth. The visual effect of the polished casing would have been transformative. When new, the pyramid didn't look like a stepped stone structure, didn't reveal the internal construction. It appeared as a smooth, gleaming surface, its polished faces reflecting sunlight with eye-searing intensity. Early observers described it as appearing to be made of light itself, a beacon visible for miles. Imagine sunrise at Giza. As the sun crested the eastern horizon, the pyramid's eastern face would catch the first rays, transforming into a blazing triangle of reflected light. The effect would have been visible for miles across the Nile Delta, announcing the presence of divine power made manifest in stone. As the sun climbed, different faces would catch the light, creating a daily cycle of illumination that echoed the sun god's journey. In the clear desert air, the polished pyramid would have been visible from extraordinary distances. Travellers approaching Cairo from any direction would have seen the pyramids long before reaching them, their white surfaces standing in stark contrast to the golden desert sand. They would have appeared to float above the horizon, shimmering in the heat haze, otherworldly in their perfection. The casing stones came from Tura, a limestone quarry across the Nile from Giza. Tura limestone is finer grained and whiter than the local limestone, making it ideal for a polished finish. Transporting these precisely cut stones across the river and up to the pyramid site represented a significant logistical achievement. Each stone had to be protected during transport to prevent damage to its polished surface. Over centuries, and particularly after a major earthquake in the 14th century loosened many casing stones, the polished covering was systematically stripped away. Medieval builders used the fine limestone to construct mosques and buildings in Cairo. The pyramid became a quarry, its outer skin harvested to build other structures. What took decades to construct was dismantled over centuries of opportunistic stone harvesting. A few casing stones remain in place at the pyramid's base, protected by accumulated debris and fallen blocks. These fragments allow us to see the original surface treatment, confirm descriptions from earlier observers, demonstrate the precision of the cutting and polishing. Running your hand along one of these surviving stones, you can feel how smooth it is, how carefully finished, how different from the rough core blocks now exposed. The pyramidion, the capstone that once crowned the pyramid, was likely covered in gold or electrum, a gold-silver alloy. This would have made the pyramid's peak shine even more brilliantly than its white sides, marking the convergence point of the four faces and the symbolic link between earth and heaven. The golden cap would have caught the sun's first and last rays each day, visible as a point of light long before the rest of the pyramid emerged from darkness. The casing stones weren't just cut and polished. Each one was shaped to fit its specific position on the pyramid's face, accounting for the slight curve of each face and ensuring the smooth transition from base to apex. This required mathematical calculation for each stone's angle and precise execution in cutting. Each of the approximately 144,000 casing stones was unique. Stripped of its casing, the pyramid looks ancient, weathered, mysterious in its roughness. But we must remember, for most of its existence, it looked new, intentional, triumphant. What we see today is the skeleton, the core exposed. What the ancients saw was the finished achievement, perfect and gleaming, a monument that announced Egyptian power and divine order to anyone who saw it. The transformation from polished magnificence to rough pyramid took centuries, happening gradually as stone was removed for other projects. By the time Napoleon saw the pyramids in 1798, they already looked much as they do today. Their covering long gone, their original appearance preserved only in written descriptions and the few fragments still clinging to the base. Chapter 7. Misunderstood. For centuries, the pyramid wasn't built by slaves. This misconception, popularized by ancient historians like Herodotus, who visited Egypt 2,000 years after construction, and reinforced by biblical narratives and Hollywood films, contradicts all archaeological evidence. The builders were skilled workers, compensated for their labor, proud of their achievement. The persistence of this myth says more about later cultures' assumptions than about ancient Egyptian reality. The precision and scale of the pyramid have led some to claim it couldn't have been built by ancient humans and must represent alien intervention or lost advanced civilizations. These claims ignore both the archaeological evidence of Egyptian capability and rest on the assumption that ancient non-European peoples couldn't achieve sophisticated engineering. The pyramid is impressive precisely because humans built it, because it represents what organized, sustained human effort can accomplish. When classical Greek and Roman civilizations encountered the pyramids, Egypt's pyramid-building age was already more ancient to them than Rome is to us. They marveled at the structures, but often misunderstood their purpose, ascribing them to vanity and hubris rather than religious devotion. Herodotus recorded stories about Khufu that portrayed him as a tyrant who enslaved his people, narratives that tell us more about Greek assumptions than Egyptian reality. During the Islamic medieval period, some believed the pyramids contained vast treasures or ancient wisdom preserved from before the Great Flood. This led to multiple attempts to break into them, including the creation of the entrance tourists use today, forced through the masonry in search of riches that didn't exist. These treasure hunters did permanent damage, creating passages that bypass the pyramid's original entrance system. Various claims assert the pyramid encodes pi, the golden ratio phi, the speed of light, the Earth's dimensions, or other constants. While some proportional relationships exist, attributing modern mathematical constants to ancient builders requires selective measurement and often ignores the evidence of how such proportions actually arose from practical building decisions and aesthetic choices rather than intentional encoding of universal constants. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height approximates 2 times pi. However, this can arise naturally from using a rolling drum to measure and establish the angle, a technique that would have been available to ancient builders without requiring knowledge of pi as an abstract constant. The relationship is real, but it doesn't necessarily indicate intentional encoding of mathematical knowledge. Some claim the pyramid's proportions reflect the golden ratio, phi, a number found throughout nature and art. While certain measurements create ratios close to phi, these can be explained by the pyramid's angle and the geometric properties that angle creates, rather than intentional encoding. The Egyptians had sophisticated mathematical knowledge, but we must be careful about projecting our mathematical concepts onto their design choices. Serious scientific study of the pyramids began in the 19th century, when scholars like Jean-François Champollion's decipherment of hieroglyphics allowed researchers to actually read ancient Egyptian texts. This transformed understanding from speculation to evidence-based analysis. For the first time, researchers could read what Egyptians wrote about themselves, their beliefs, their practices. The 20th century brought systematic excavation, careful documentation, and scientific analysis. Rather than seeking treasure or mysteries, researchers focused on understanding the pyramids in their cultural and historical context. Excavations of worker villages, analysis of tools and techniques, study of contemporary texts and records, all built a comprehensive picture of how and why the pyramids were built. Despite centuries of study, significant questions remain. This doesn't validate wild theories or suggest hidden knowledge. It simply reflects the reality that ancient Egypt predates detailed written construction records, leaving us to deduce techniques from physical evidence and fragmentary texts. Mystery isn't proof of the impossible. It's just the natural state of studying the distant past. Chapter 8. Modern Discoveries. In recent decades, researchers have begun using non-invasive scanning techniques to study the pyramid's interior without drilling or damaging the structure. These methods include muon radiography, which uses cosmic ray particles to create density maps, infrared thermography, which reveals temperature variations indicating hidden chambers, and three-dimensional laser scanning, which creates precise models of the pyramid's geometry. The Scan Pyramids project, beginning in 2015, used cosmic ray muon detectors to create images of the pyramid's internal density. Muons are particles created when cosmic rays strike Earth's atmosphere. They penetrate stone but are partially absorbed based on density, allowing researchers to map internal voids. The technique is slow, requiring months of data collection, but completely non-invasive. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids team announced the detection of a large void above the Grand Gallery. This space, approximately 100 feet long, was previously unknown. Its purpose and contents remain mysterious, as it's inaccessible without creating new passages through the pyramid, something researchers are unwilling to do. The void exists. We know its approximate size and location. What it contains remains unknown. Small robots have been sent through the narrow shafts extending from the King's Chamber and Queen's Chamber, carrying cameras to document areas humans can't reach. These explorations have revealed previously unknown chambers and features, small spaces carved into the pyramid's interior. Each discovery raises new questions about the pyramid's design and purpose. The robots exploring the shafts from the Queen's Chamber encountered stone doors with copper handles. When carefully drilled and explored, these led to small spaces, then additional doors. What lies beyond remains unknown. Each answer reveals new mysteries, new spaces we didn't know existed. Modern archaeology moves slowly, prioritizing preservation over discovery. Each intervention must be carefully planned to minimize damage. This means some mysteries may remain unsolved for years or decades until technology advances sufficiently. We could find answers faster if we were willing to break through walls and drill into chambers, but the cost would be irreversible damage to an irreplaceable structure. New discoveries in Egypt continue regularly, not just at Giza, but throughout the Nile Valley. Ancient settlements, quarries, worker villages, and texts continue to emerge from the sand, each adding pieces to our understanding of the civilization that built the pyramids. Each new tomb discovered, each papyrus translated, each settlement excavated, adds context to the pyramids themselves. The pyramids of Giza, along with the entire Memphis necropolis, were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979. This classification provides international protection and recognizes the pyramids as heritage belonging to all humanity, not just Egypt. The designation comes with responsibilities for preservation and careful management. Millions of people visit the pyramids annually, creating both economic benefit and conservation challenges. Balancing access with protection requires constant effort. Human presence accelerates deterioration through humidity from breath, erosion from touch, simple physical contact. Managing tourism while preserving the monuments requires ongoing vigilance and careful planning. Desert conditions have preserved the pyramids better than any other environment could, but they're not immune to environmental damage. Wind erosion gradually wears away exposed surfaces. Salt crystallization, when rare moisture penetrates the stone and then evaporates, can crack and crumble the limestone. Occasional rain, though rare, can cause damage. Temperature fluctuations between scorching days and cool nights create expansion and contraction that slowly wears the stone. Chapter 9. The Pyramid Today. The Great Pyramid has stood for over 4,500 years. It predates classical Greece by 2,000 years. It was already ancient when Rome was founded. It stood finished for over 1,000 years before the first books of the Hebrew Bible were written. Try to grasp that span of time. 45 centuries, more than half of recorded human history. The pyramid has survived countless earthquakes, including major tremors that destroyed other structures in the region. Its form provides inherent stability, and the precision of its construction has allowed it to flex and settle without catastrophic failure. When the ground shakes, the pyramid absorbs the energy, moves slightly, then settles back into stability. Its mass is its protection. Despite modern Cairo's expansion, despite the sprawl of buildings that now reach nearly to the plateau's edge, the pyramid still dominates the landscape. From many parts of Cairo, you can look up and see it, exactly where it's always been, unchanged while everything around it transforms. The city grows, changes, rebuilds itself generation after generation, while the pyramid remains. The pyramid represents many things to many people: ancient achievement, human ambition, religious devotion, engineering triumph, historical mystery. It's been called the machine of eternity, the mountain of light, the throne of Pharaoh. But perhaps most fundamentally, it's evidence that humans, working together with purpose and dedication, can create something that transcends their individual lifespans and speaks across millennia. Tonight, the desert wind still moves across the Giza Plateau. The stars wheel overhead in patterns that have shifted since the pyramid was new. The pole star no longer where it was when those astronomical shafts were aimed. Sand accumulates and is blown away, accumulates again. The sun rises, blazes across the sky, and sets as it has done more than 1.6 million times since the final block was placed. The pyramid doesn't need us to understand it. It doesn't require our theories or our amazement. It existed for thousands of years before modern archaeology, and it will exist long after we're gone. But we're drawn to it anyway, generation after generation, seeking meaning in its massive permanence, finding questions in its precise angles. As you drift towards sleep tonight, imagine standing at the pyramid's base as darkness settles completely. The rough stone rises above you, each block representing countless hours of human effort. Somewhere within, the king's chamber sits empty, sealed in darkness, unchanged since the last torch was extinguished millennia ago. The grand gallery angles upward through millions of tons of stone. The shafts point towards stars that have shifted in the sky. The pyramid keeps its secrets, not out of malice or mystery, but simply because it is stone. It cannot speak, it can only stand. And in standing, it reminds us that humans, for all our limitations, for all our brief individual existence, can create something that outlasts empire, outlasts language, outlasts everything but time itself. The desert wind continues its eternal movement across the sand. The pyramid remains, exactly where it has always been, exactly what it has always been, a monument to belief, to effort, to the uniquely human drive to create something eternal. Rest now. The pyramid has stood for 45 centuries. It will still be standing when you wake.